The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as Mr. Daniel Harper unlocked the door to room 214. He paused for a moment in the hallway, closing his eyes against the hum, savoring, if only for a heartbeat, the rare quiet before the storm of teenage chatter. His polished shoes clicked against the linoleum floor as he entered, dropping his worn satchel onto the teacher's desk. The satchel, lined with fraying seams, carried his lesson plans, a half-read novel, and a collection of grading pens whose caps never quite stayed on. He ran a hand along the top of the desk, smoothing scattered papers into a neat stack. Economics class always felt like his battleground, balancing a curriculum squeezed by district budget cuts, a class roster bursting at the seams, and the perpetual challenge of engaging 15-year-olds whose attention spans were measured in seconds. Today, the budget memo lay smack in the middle of his desk, a thin envelope stamped mandatory in oversized red letters. He'd open it later, but for now, he needed to prepare. At exactly 7:48 a.m., the first students drifted in. A knot of freshmen whispered at the back. Two juniors trailed behind them, arguing quietly about a history project. Mr. Harper nodded curtly at each newcomer, barely acknowledging their presence. The chatter rose to a dull roar by 7:53 a.m., and he cleared his throat, glancing at the wall clock. "All right," he said, voice low but carrying. "Please take your seats." Most complied. Desks scraped against the floor as chairs slid in. He clicked the remote for the projector. The overhead lights dimmed, and the whiteboard flickered to life with the title, Supply and Demand, The Invisible Hand. Harper moved to stand beside the screen, hands clasped behind his back, spine straight. This was his element, explaining theory, drawing supply curves by hand, challenging students with real-world examples. But something tugged at the edge of his mind. The envelope. He had 30 minutes until the bell. Maybe he could open it before he lost himself in demand elasticity formulas. He shifted his gaze to the unopened flap and hesitated. Just then, the door swung open with a jarring thud. All heads swiveled toward the entrance. Late again. Of course it was late again. In walked Jacob Jake Reynolds, senior and perennial tardy student, hands in the pockets of a backpack that looked almost too expensive for a teenager. He sauntered in with the confidence of someone who knew the rules and knew he could bend them. Mr. Harper pinched the bridge of his nose. His patience had worn thin this semester. Teachers' meetings had run overtime every week. Staff morale hovered in the red zone. And the late students? His tolerance meter had bottomed out. "Mr. Reynolds," he called, voice taut. Jake paused, flicked his gaze toward the front, then back at the clock. In his peripheral vision, Mr. Harper watched Jake smirk. It stung. "Seated, please," Harper said, louder this time, trying to maintain composure. Jake offered a half-hearted nod and turned toward an empty desk in the front row, but his swagger faltered as Harper marched off the side of the stage-like platform and toward the center of the room. Other students fell silent, sensing the tension. When Jake reached the desk, Harper took an uncharacteristic step. He planted one foot firmly on top of Jake's desk. The surface creaked under the sudden weight. "You've got to leave," he barked, voice echoing. The class gasped. Some students shrank in their seats, others leaned forward, eyes wide. Jake froze. His back straightened. A simple leave would have sufficed, but Harper's choice of words and action crossed an unspoken line. He stomped down harder, rattling the books. "I will not begin my lesson until you walk out that door and think about respect." A bead of sweat formed at Jacob's temple, not from fear but from disbelief. Forks clinked against trays in the cafeteria below. The distant hum of morning announcements flickered across the intercom. For a moment, Jake's silence hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown. Harper's chest rose and fell rapidly. He glanced at his watch. The bell would ring in 4 minutes. His adrenaline surged. He needed to defuse this before the vice principal showed up. But pride rooted him to the spot. Behind him, the projector hummed. Lesson 1.1, Defining Markets. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Mr. Harper's own market of authority was collapsing. Jake finally spoke, voice calm but firm. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm late." He reached back, unzipped his backpack, and, rather than fleeing, pulled out a neatly folded sheet of paper. Harper's brow furrowed. "It's my board approval form," Jake said, eyes steady. Confusion flashed across Harper's face. "Board approval?" Before Harper could respond, the principal's office door clacked open downstairs. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. The bell's final chime resounded through the hallway. All at once, room 214 felt impossibly small. Harper realized his mistake. He descended from the desk, face flushed. Jake tucked the paper into his pocket and stood tall, silent. Mr. Harper cleared his throat, voice cracking. "Mr. Reynolds, please take your seat." His words felt empty, hollow even to his own ears. As Jake slid into the desk behind him, the room exhaled collectively. Students exchanged sideways glances, whispers igniting softly like shared secrets. Harper stepped back to the front, juggled the remote, and clicked to the next slide. The invisible hand. Theory versus practice. His hands trembled just enough for the slide to jitter. He swallowed, forced a smile, and began to speak. But inside, he knew that this morning had already set a new, uncertain rhythm for the days to come. The classroom air felt thick after the eruption. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Pens hovered midair, feet pressed against the floor in anticipation, and even the buzzing projectors seemed to pause in shock. Mr. Harper stood a few feet away from Jake's desk, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He watched Jake, who, instead of storming out in humiliation, remained unnervingly calm. With slow deliberation, Jake bent to retrieve his backpack from beneath the desk. His classmates held their breath. Jake unzipped the bag and, with practiced ease, lifted out the crisp sheet of paper he had mentioned minutes before. It was unassuming. Standard letterhead from the school district, bearing the unmistakable seal of the school board, and a signature line that read, "Student Representative Approval." His fingers skimmed the edges, as though touching a relic of some secret society. Silence reigned as Mr. Harper cleared his throat, the single sound uncomfortably loud. He wondered if the vice principal had already arrived in the hallway. Already he could hear muffled footsteps approaching the classroom door. Panic flickered across his mind. How would this look? A teacher publicly shaming the very student elected to represent his peers on the school's highest governing body. Behind Jake, the students exchanged furtive glances. Maria Delgado, whose best friend was Jake's cousin, leaned forward and whispered to the girl beside her, "Is that really him?" Across the aisle, Tom Bridges scribbled a quick note to his neighbor. "Who is this kid?" The room buzzed with suppressed curiosity. Mr. Harper felt sweat bead at his temples. He reminded himself to breathe, though each inhalation felt shallow. He wanted to smooth his hair, adjust his tie, anything to reclaim a shred of authority. But words failed him. Every possible apology sounded hollow. Instead, he watched Jake fold the letter, place it back into his backpack, and secure the zipper with a click that reverberated through the hush. Then, Jake did something unexpected. He turned and looked Mr. Harper squarely in the eyes. The challenge in that steady gaze was not one of aggression, but of composed confidence. It struck Harper like a cold gust. This was not some mischievous prankster, but a young man who understood power, responsibility, and the very real consequences of a misstep. "Mr. Harper," Jake said, his voice measured, "I understand you're upset, and I apologize for being late, but I think we both need to rethink how respect is earned." The words landed in the room with surprising weight. They weren't laced with spite or arrogance. They carried an invitation to dialogue, to understanding, to reconciliation. Harper opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Mr. Reynolds, I—" At that moment, the classroom door swung open. The vice principal, Ms. Thompson, entered, flanked by two members of the school board. Their presence transformed the room from a typical high school classroom into a stage for official proceedings. A low murmur rippled through the students as Ms. Thompson's heels clicked across the floor. "Mr. Harper," she said, voice calm but firm, "I'd like to see you and Mr. Reynolds in my office." Her gaze swept the room, and a few students straightened in their seats, suddenly aware that history was unfolding before them. Harper nodded mutely, cheeks flushed. Jake slung his backpack over one shoulder and gave Harper a curt nod of acknowledgement. The class watched them go, desks scraping as they rose. Harper glanced back once, meeting Maria's wide-eyed stare. He managed a tight smile. In the hallway, the late-morning light filtered through high windows, patterns of dust motes dancing in the shafts. The corridor was deserted. Most students had already filed into their next period. But here, near the principal's office, a hush persisted. The door was propped open. Through the glass pane, Harper could see a polished mahogany desk and a row of leather-bound policy manuals on a shelf. Board members stood by the window, their faces unreadable. Miss Thompson closed the door behind them, and the muffled click of the lock sounded like a verdict. Harper's palms were clammy against his sides. He took a breath. Jake stood a respectful distance away, hands folded in front of him. The formal setting accentuated the power imbalance Harper had so recklessly tried to assert just minutes earlier. One of the board members, Mr. Daniels, cleared his throat. He was a tall, silver-haired man with a kindly expression, until that expression turned cold as he addressed Jake. Mr. Reynolds, we understand you have an urgent meeting. We wish to discuss your role as student representative and ensure you're properly introduced to the board. Jake lifted his chin. Yes, sir, thank you. He glanced at Harper, then back at Ms. Thompson. I also think Mr. Harper deserves an apology. His words were respectful but firm. The board members exchanged glances. Harper's heart sank. He could feel every drop of blood draining from his face. He stepped forward. Ms. Thompson, members of the board, he began, voice shaking. I owe Mr. Reynolds and this entire class an apology. My actions were unprofessional and disrespectful. There is no excuse for me stomping onto a student's desk, nor for questioning his right to attend class. The room was silent save for the hum of the air conditioner. Jake regarded Harper with a mixture of surprise and relief. The vice principal studied Harper's face, then nodded slowly. Thank you, Mr. Harper. Accountability is the first step toward resolution. Harper swallowed. The weight of his mistake settled on his shoulders. But in that moment, he also sensed a fragile bridge forming between teacher and student. Jake nodded, and Harper saw in that gesture the possibility of a partnership, one that could heal the day's wounds. As they were dismissed, Harper lingered at the door of the office a moment longer, catching Jake's eye. No words passed between them, but a quiet understanding did, a promise that what had begun in conflict might yet evolve into cooperation. Then the classroom door swung open once more, and they re-entered room 214 together, the tension replaced by a tentative anticipation of what would come next. Mr. Harper lingered in the hallway for a moment, his cuffed sleeve brushing the polished locker doors as he gathered his composure. The bell for the next class had rung, and the corridor was almost deserted, just a lone custodian pushing a janitor's cart around the corner. Yet the silence here felt heavier than that in the classroom. With each step toward the principal's office, Harper's pulse hammered against his ribs. He rehearsed apologies in his mind, only to feel them crumble into dust. He paused outside the door. Through the frosted glass, he could just make out the silhouettes of Ms. Thompson and two stern-looking adults in dark suits. One stood with arms folded, the other was leafing through a leather-bound folder. To Harper's surprise, Jake Reynolds was already there, standing at perfect attention, as if he had been waiting for this moment since birth. Jake's posture was uncharacteristically formal, his backpack slung over one shoulder like a briefcase. Ms. Thompson noticed Harper first. Mr. Harper, she said, voice low but urgent. Come in, please. Harper took a breath and entered. The office was larger than he remembered. Mahogany paneling on 3 walls, portraits of past principals looking down like sentinels. A large oval table occupied the center, its surface gleaming under a skylight. Around it sat 5 members of the school board, 2 women and 3 men, each with an unreadable expression. At the head of the table was Principal Dawson, her silver hair pinned in a tight knot at the back of her head. Thank you for joining us, Principal Dawson began, gesturing to the empty chair beside Jake. Daniel, you know Mr. Reynolds? Harper swallowed. I do, ma'am, he managed. He glanced at Jake, whose dark eyes held steady. Principal Dawson turned to Jake's right. Jake, would you remind us of your new role? Jake stepped forward, removed his backpack, and placed it gently under the table. He straightened his tie, then cleared his throat. I was recently elected student representative to the school board. My term begins next week. According to our bylaws, I attend monthly board meetings with full speaking privileges on student affairs. His tone was crisp, respectful, yet hovered with the quiet confidence of someone born to leadership. One of the board members, Ms. Patel, leaned forward. And you informed Mr. Harper of this paperwork this morning? Jake nodded. Yes, ma'am. I intended to deliver the form in person during homeroom, but I was 5 minutes late. He met Harper's gaze directly. I apologize to Mr. Harper for the disruption. Harper's throat tightened. The formal apology from the student cut through his earlier indignation. He realized how small and petulant his own reaction had been. His hand trembled as he reached into his jacket pocket. He withdrew the crumpled envelope, now creased and worn around the edges, and placed it on the table. Board members, he said, voice steadying, I want to acknowledge my behavior was out of line. I allowed my frustration to override my professionalism. Mr. Reynolds had every right to be here. A hush fell. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner. Principal Dawson nodded once. Accountability is important, she said. Mr. Armstrong, a veteran board member with round spectacles, tapped his pencil against the form. Mr. Reynolds, do you feel Mr. Harper's apology is sufficient? Jake paused as if weighing more than words. Then he offered a small smile. I accept it, sir. Ms. Patel opened the leather folder and withdrew another document. Harper's stomach clenched. What could this be? A reprimand? A memo about disciplinary action? Mr. Harper, she said, this is the agenda for next week's board meeting. We would like you to join us, along with Mr. Reynolds, to discuss the new student leadership initiatives. She slid the papers across the table toward him. Your insights as one of the school's most experienced faculty members will be valuable. Harper felt a dizzying mix of relief and apprehension. Only an hour ago, he had stomped onto a student's desk in anger. Now he was being invited to collaborate with that same student at the highest level of school governance. He placed a tentative hand on the stack of papers. I would be honored, he whispered. Jake inched forward, extending his hand. I look forward to working with you, Mr. Harper. Harper hesitated for a split second, then clasped Jake's hand firmly. It was a handshake charged with newfound respect, bridging their earlier clash. Around the table, the board members exchanged approving nods. Principal Dawson broke the quiet. Mr. Harper, Mr. Reynolds, thank you for your candor. We're here because we believe positive change can come from collaboration. Today's events remind us that authority is not just about rules, but about understanding. Harper sank back into his chair, the weight of the morning's lessons settling on his shoulders. He glanced at Jake, whose composed expression never wavered. In that moment, Harper understood that Jake's election wasn't a gimmick. It was a testament to the student body's faith in his leadership, poise, and vision. The meeting moved on to outline proposals. A student-led tutoring program, a mental health awareness campaign spearheaded by students, and a committee to review disciplinary policies. Harper took notes, found himself offering ideas, and felt something he hadn't in years, a spark of genuine hope for the school's future. When the meeting adjourned, Principal Dawson clasped both Harper and Jake on the shoulder. Thank you, she said simply. As they stepped out into the bright afternoon light, the contrast was stark. Gone was the tension. In its place, an invigorating sense of purpose. Harper exhaled, rubbing his temples. Jake, he began, voice soft, I owe you more than an apology. Thank you for showing me what leadership really looks like. Jake smiled, no trace of condescension, only warmth. Thank you for being willing to learn. Together, teacher and student walked down the hallway, not as adversaries, but as partners. The echoes of their footsteps felt like the opening notes of a new chapter, one written not by authority alone, but by mutual respect and shared vision. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of room 214, casting slender beams across the rows of desks. Mr. Harper arrived early, clutching a fresh stack of proposal drafts in his ever-present satchel, now heavy with the weight of new responsibilities. He paused at the door, inhaling deeply. Today marked the first joint meeting between faculty and the newly formed Student Leadership Committee, an initiative Jake Reynolds had championed before the board. As Mr. Harper stepped inside, he found Jake already seated at the front, his neat blazer replaced by a crisp school jacket, a tablet open before him. Good morning, Mr. Reynolds, Harper greeted, offering a tentative smile. Jake looked up, returning the smile with an ease that warmed Harper's nerves. Morning, Mr. Harper. Ready to get started? Jake's tone was conversational, yet carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to leading. Harper nodded, walked to the whiteboard, and wrote, Student Faculty Mentoring Pilot, in bold letters. He tapped the marker tip against the board thoughtfully. A cluster of 6 students, each selected for their diverse backgrounds and academic interests, filed in and took their seats in a semicircle. On the opposite side, 3 more teachers joined them, curious but cautious. Once everyone was settled, Harper cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. Last week, Jake and I presented a proposal to Principal Dawson and the board. They've greenlit a pilot mentoring program to bridge the gap between students and faculty, to improve communication and support. He glanced at Jake, who nodded and tapped his tablet, pulling up a slide titled Program Goals. Jake stood and addressed the group. Our goals are simple. 1. Pair each student with a faculty mentor for academic guidance. 2. Host monthly workshops on real-world skills. 3. Create an open forum for feedback on school policies. His voice was firm but inviting. The students exchanged excited glances. The teachers leaned forward, scribbling notes. Over the next 2 hours, the group worked through logistics, matching mentors and mentees based on interests, drafting workshop topics ranging from financial literacy to creative writing, and designing feedback surveys. Harper found himself genuinely energized. He saw how Jake deftly guided the conversation, encouraging a quiet sophomore to speak up, gently redirecting an overenthusiastic teacher, and always circling back to the program's core aims. By midday, they had a preliminary schedule. The first mentor-mentee meeting would take place next Tuesday after school. Harper volunteered his own classroom as the venue, offering to bring snacks to lower the barrier for students. Jake grinned. I'll organize the sign-up sheet and send everyone an invite through the school portal. As the meeting adjourned, Harper walked Jake to the door. I have to admit, he said, half laughing, I almost didn't see how much potential there was in this idea. Jake shrugged. Sometimes the best ideas come from those we least expect. You took a risk in supporting this, Mr. Harper. Harper paused at the corner of the hallway, watching students pass by on their lunch break. For the first time, he felt a kinship with the teenagers bustling past. No longer just an authority figure, but a collaborator in their success. Now let's check back in after the first meeting, he offered. Absolutely, Jake replied. See you then. Tuesday afternoon arrived with a brisk wind that rattled the windows of room 214. Outside, students clustered in the corridor, chatting animatedly about end-of-term exams. Inside, a dozen desks had been pushed into pairs, each with a name card marking a mentor-mentee duo. A small table in the corner held trays of juice boxes, granola bars, and sliced fruit. Harper's contribution. One by one, students and teachers trickled in. So, Alvarez, the Spanish teacher, greeted her mentee, a shy junior named Priya, with a warm handshake. Across the room, Mr. Chen, the science teacher, and his mentee, enthusiastic freshman Marcus, exchanged excited smiles. Harper watched as his own mentee, Ella, a witty senior with a passion for journalism, bounded into the room and immediately launched into questions about college applications. At precisely 3:15 p.m., Harper tapped his glass with a spoon and the room hushed. Welcome, everyone, he began. Today is our inaugural meeting. The goal is simple. Get to know each other, share your challenges, and set at least one goal for the semester. He stepped aside as Jake stood and approached the whiteboard. Jake wrote 3 guiding questions. What do you hope to gain from this program? What skills would you like to develop? And how can we improve school life together? He invited the pairs to discuss for 10 minutes, then return for a group debrief. Harper circled the room, listening in. Ms. Alvarez and Priya spoke Spanish softly, the teacher guiding the student through verb conjugations and cultural exchange plans. Mr. Chen and Marcus sketched a makeshift volcano on scrap paper, Marcus animatedly explaining his science fair idea. Harper reached Ella's desk, where she and Harper were already engrossed in a lively conversation about editorial internships and portfolio building. The energy in the room was electric. When Jake called everyone back together, he prompted each pair to share one insight. Priya spoke about finding confidence in speaking another language. Marcus talked about how having an adult listener made him more motivated. Ella spoke last, voicing how she felt supported and inspired to aim higher in her writing goals. As the hour drew to a close, Harper looked at the clock and realized it was nearly 4:30 p.m. He stood and addressed the room. I'm proud of everyone for showing up and being open. This is just the beginning. Together, we'll refine the program and hopefully expand it next semester. He motioned to Jake. Any final thoughts? Jake smiled, scanning the room. Thank you all for trusting us with your time. We want this to grow, so please, keep giving feedback. He tapped his tablet. I'll send a quick survey tonight. The students applauded, rising from their seats. As they filtered out, several stopped to thank their mentors. Harper watched Ella give him a quick hug, whispering, "Thank you, Mr. Harper," in his ear. He felt a genuine warmth spread through his chest. Once the room was empty, Harper and Jake gathered the remaining cups and wrappers. Harper began stacking chairs, while Jake folded the table. The silence between them was comfortable, a marked contrast to their first encounter. At last, Harper looked up. You know, he said, I never imagined stepping off a desk would lead me here. Jake chuckled, sliding a chair under the desk. Life works in mysterious ways. I'm glad you took the leap. Harper grinned. Me too. Let's keep turning tables, this time for all the right reasons. And as they left the room together, Harper realized that the teacher student dynamic had shifted irrevocably. What began as a misstep of authority had transformed into a partnership built on respect, collaboration, and shared vision. Proof that sometimes the greatest lessons aren't found in textbooks, but in the courage to change. 6 weeks had passed since the inaugural mentoring session, and Room 214 had become something of a neutral zone, a place where students and teachers met not as adversaries, but as collaborators. The once sterile economics classroom now bore the marks of shared experience. Sticky notes of feedback clustered around the whiteboard, mismatched chairs grouped in clusters for discussion, and a small shelf in the corner stocked with snacks and stress balls donated by students. Mr. Harper arrived on a crisp Thursday morning and found Jake already there, setting up a flip chart by the window. The late autumn sun slanted in, illuminating Jake's neat handwriting. Week 6. Community Outreach and Reflection. Below the heading, bullet points outline today's agenda. Pair debrief and success stories planning. Next week's community service project. Open mic, reflections from mentors and mentees. Harper smiled as he placed his tote bag down. "You're getting good at this," he teased. Jake looked up, grin in place. "I've had a great teacher." The first group to arrive was Ms. Rivera, the English teacher, with her mentee Sophia, a soft-spoken junior who had once confessed she hated talking in front of people. Now, Sophia strode confidently, clutching a notebook filled with poetry. Next came Mr. Lin and his mentee, Aiden, who had begun leading a lunchtime chess club after Mr. Lin's encouragement. Over the weeks, the mentoring pilot had branched into extracurricular support, career talks, even lunchtime study sessions. By 3:05 p.m., 6 pairs had settled into the semicircle. Harper tapped a marker against the flip chart. "Welcome back, everyone. Let's start with debriefing. What successes have you seen in your pairing?" The responses flowed easily. Sophia spoke first. "Ms. Rivera helped me overcome my fear of public speaking. Last week, I read one of my poems at the poetry slam, and I wasn't shaking." Laughter and applause rippled through the group. Ms. Rivera beamed. "Your words were beautiful, Sophia. That was all you." Next, Aiden recounted how Mr. Lin had introduced him to local chess tournaments. "I placed third in the under-14 division." Aiden's eyes shone with pride. Mr. Lin ruffled his hair. "And you pushed yourself to study different openings. That discipline will serve you beyond the board." One by one, each duo shared a milestone. A shy freshman invited to join the debate team. A teacher-mentee duo who had co-authored a short story for the school magazine. Even another pair who organized a mini science fair for underclassmen. Each story underscored a growing shift. Students felt empowered, and teachers rediscovered their passion beyond lecterns and lesson plans. As the applause died down, Harper turned to Jake. "Your turn. We've had planning and reports. What's next?" Jake flipped to the second page. "Next week, we launch our community service initiative. We'll partner with the local senior center to host a tech help workshop. High schoolers teaching seniors how to use smartphones, tablets, and social media safely." He looked around. This not only serves the community, but trains our students in teaching and empathy." A murmur of agreement spread. One student raised a hand. "What if some seniors don't have devices?" Harper exchanged a glance with Jake. "Good point," he said. "We can collect gently used tablets and phones. I'll speak to the district office about opening a donation drive." Jake scribbled notes. "And I'll draft a sign-up sheet for mentors to bring devices or plan for printed guides." With logistics settled, Harper motioned toward a small stage area by the board. "Now for the open mic. Any reflections on how this program has changed your perception of school life?" A hush fell. Then, slowly, hands rose. Ethan, a usually reticent sophomore, spoke first. "I used to think teachers were unapproachable, but spending just an hour a week talking to Ms. Carter about music showed me they have lives outside the classroom, too." Ms. Carter nodded, misty-eyed. "Next, Ms.?" Nguyen, a math teacher, admitted, "I rediscovered the joy of learning alongside my students. Helping Jamal with algebra reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place." Jamal pumped his fist theatrically, earning laughs. When it came to Harper himself, he felt his heart pound, but he rose to speak. "When I first stomped on Jake's desk, I saw only a disrespectful student. Today, I see a capable leader who challenged me to rethink my role. This program has taught me humility. Jake gave him a quick nod, and the group responded with warm applause. As the session ended, the pairs lingered, taking selfies, exchanging email addresses, promising to meet at the senior center next Tuesday. Harper and Jake gathered the empty snack wrappers. The classroom's atmosphere felt electric with possibility. Later that afternoon, Harper and Jake walked down the corridor together, passing colorful posters advertising the upcoming community workshop. Tech Bridges, Teens, and Elders Connect. Students were already sticking on flyers. Advisors from the senior center were setting up a booth by the main office. Jake paused at a bulletin board displaying thank you notes from last week's tutoring session. One card read, "Dear Harper and Jake, thank you for teaching me how to calculate my own grades. You helped me believe I could graduate. Maria." Harper's throat tightened. "Look at this," he said, pointing. Jake joined him, eyes scanning the handwritten note. "We did that," Jake said softly. "Together." Harper straightened. "Our team." On the day of the workshop, the gymnasium buzzed as teenagers knelt beside seniors, demonstrating touchscreen gestures and explaining privacy settings. Harper found himself guiding a grandmother through video calls with her grandchildren overseas, while Jake led a small group of students in troubleshooting email issues. Laughter echoed as an octogenarian accidentally switched to emojis, only to break into delighted giggles when she realized she'd sent a winking face to her pastor. By late afternoon, all devices were unboxed and donated, the tech library preparations complete. Teachers and students exchanged high fives. The senior center director presented a framed certificate in appreciation of our young tech ambassadors, signed by both school administrators and the senior center board. Jake accepted it on behalf of the group, then turned to Harper and presented a smaller plaque. To Mr. Harper, for leading with courage and compassion. The crowd applauded as Harper accepted it, cheeks flushed. He met Jake's eyes across the gym floor, and in that moment, the journey that had begun with conflict and a desk stomp reached full circle. That evening, back in his quiet living room, Harper reflected on the past month. He thought of the nervous look on Jake's face when he first revealed his board position, of the tense apology in the vice principal's office, of the trembling slide on the invisible hand. He considered the mentors who rediscovered their passion and the students who found their voices. He picked up his phone and typed a message to Jake. "Thank you, Jake. Today was incredible. I'm proud of what we've built together, and I can't wait to see what comes next." Within seconds, his phone buzzed. "Right back at you, Mr. Harper. On to Chapter 6? Harper smiled, tucking the phone under his pillow. As he drifted to sleep, he realized that the greatest lesson he'd learned wasn't about supply and demand or policy and procedure, but about the power of human connection. A teacher and a student, once at odds, had joined forces, and in doing so had transformed a school, a community, and themselves. The next chapter waited, one written not in textbooks, but in the hands and hearts of those brave enough to turn tension into teamwork.